Hi, it's me, Naris. Again, another live stream. Now, um, in this live stream, I just wanted to um present a few questions, just for clarity and understanding. Um, for one, I just want to start off by saying again, thank you for those who are new followers and subscribers and supporters of the movement. And yeah, first course of action. I put out an EP almost 5 years ago that saved my life. And through the years, it's shifted and evolved in terms of its like meaning for me. And I didn't resonate with the art that it initially was made with. So I am on a press run rebranding that project. And the EP Divine is now called The Infatuate World of Neptune. And yeah, I'm really proud of the project and how it's transpired thus far. And I'm excited this time around. I'm having a different approach in terms of the marketing. I'm actually pushing myself to like really put it out there in more mainstream spaces. So I'm excited about that. And then also, just thank you to the people who are supportive of the art and who are just supportive of me in general. And again, like to folks who believe in me and give me grace and challenge me to grow and evolve and just like care to hear my perspective about things or even like come to my defense. I'm very grateful for that. And you know, I speak blessings and success and prosperity and protection over those who wish the same for me. So, yeah, I just want to say that. Um, I just wanted to have a general conversation about just like certain perspectives about things. Briefly. Now, you know, I'm asking this out of genuine curiosity. Um, sometimes I feel like it's hard to decipher what folks want from you sometimes. Some people want you to do this and want you to say this and want you to address this and want you to dress like this and look like this and be like this. And, at the same time, is already so much like going on in life that tries to influence us to be everything that we're not. And, you know, as a young adult, I feel like we're constantly on this journey of like discovering ourselves. Like, who are we? Who do we want to be in this world? And what's the truth of our upbringing and our history and the lineage that we come from? And understanding those things and, the legacy that we lead and what we want that to be in the future. And maybe you want to do something for yourself, or maybe you want to do something that sets you apart from, you know, the family that you come from, because just because you were born into a situation doesn't mean that that's what you resonate with. And that's okay. So there's that. And in my particular standpoint when it comes to that in life, um, you know, I have just been on this constant journey for truth and like telling my truth, understanding the truth of what goes on in the world, the truth of what's going on in my life, the truth of my own lineage, and, you know, just the truth of what mystery lies, beneath the surface of what we all see in this world. I've always been curious about just understanding how the world works. And I've always been one to question authority and question what's presented to me. Sometimes, you know, I might let things like slide and it might go over my head or whatever the case may be, but there's always like a gut instinct kind of moment that like feels a little bit off about a thing. And then, depending on environments that you're in, you might be around people who try to like trick you out of like being in tune with your intuition and distrusting your own thoughts and distrusting, you know, what you know to believe is true of the world. Especially like as a woman in a patriarchal society that tries to have us not be in tune with our intuition and in tune with what we know to be true and what feels right to us, and doubting our own inner compass, and trusting and believing the messages and the signs and symbolisms of what other people want to feed to us versus, the truth of what's really going on in the world, right? So that's, uh, you know, for context. And for me, you know, I don't claim to be a perfect person. Um, Although, like, through the years, I've grown on this journey of like just being proud of who I am and embracing who I am. And through all my shifts and challenges, even in situations where a lot of what I was embracing at the time or expressing was like someone else's influence and, suggestions or, advice or whatever. And just getting to the point in my life where everything is streamlined through me, where it's like I trust my thoughts 100% because I know they're mine versus someone else like suggesting something and giving me an idea. Um, and sometimes that can be helpful, and then sometimes it can be manipulative, and just understanding that we live in a world that's like that, you know, and understanding my place in the world can be challenging sometimes because it's like, okay, I go back and forth between feeling like, okay, well, what do y'all be wanting from me, you know? Um, and this constant battle of like discovering truth within myself and not even knowing all the things that go on in my life, and not even knowing, like, sometimes it's kind of like a situation where like, say you're working a job and you're just showing up to your job, just doing your thing, and your boss is telling you to do one thing, and it's like, all right, cool, because this is what the boss told me to do, and that's what I get paid to do here. But you don't realize that in the boss telling you to do something, there's like some type of ulterior motive or like this hidden agenda. And then say you don't do the job right, or you don't do it completely, or whatever the case may be, people are looking at you like this isn't getting done, but to your recollection, you're doing what the boss is telling you to do. Nobody's questioning the boss. And I feel like we don't do that enough as a society. It's like, you know, it's like, say, especially if like the boss is like trying to get you to do things that are like, that interfere with like your integrity and whatnot. And then like when you know that it feels wrong, you step away from it, you know, and then, of course, there's always like strings being pulled in the background that we don't understand, like, beef that's going on with the executives or whatever the case may be. And you're just at your desk doing your thing. And, you're just trying to follow orders to the best of your abilities, or, just showing up and doing your job. But I feel like we don't have enough conversations talking about what happens in these executive offices. Like, why are they pushing certain agendas? Why are why is there like requests for people on smaller standpoints to have to do things where their integrity is at question? I feel like it's easy to look at the person at the front desk and always having questions and and demands and like yelling at them because that's the first person that you see, but no one's really like questioning, all right, what's happening in the back office? What's being discussed? What's the rollout for this year, the next 5 years, the next 10 years? Because usually the people that's at the executive desks are thinking that far in advance, if not thinking into the future. and planning for it. And it's easy to constantly discuss the things that's happening on the first level at the entrance, at the door. When you're having a problem and you're just going to the representative, or you're calling on the phone and you're speaking to customer service, and then, okay, you might get to a manager, so you might have a little bit of understanding of like how something's being operated. But we're not talking enough about who's bringing the orders down the chain of command, and why is that even, why, and then even with that, why aren't we questioning that, you know and I these are the things that I think about when it comes to like structure and like accountability and responsibility and whatnot. And again, it's kind of like that notion of like being a pawn in a game of chess, and most people get distracted by the battle between the pawns and the opening, but no one's really paying attention to all the other pieces on the board, and why those pieces are there, why certain moves are being made, why certain agendas are being, like, certain strategies are being pushed, who benefits from these strategies. I feel like that's the most important thing. It's like when there's issues and controversy, who benefits the most from this? Who's profiting the most? Because let's be real, especially in our day and age with media, controversy sells. People, we love a hot topic, we love drama, it's easily consumable. So people will kick up drama how they have to. But who benefits the most off this drama? Who benefits the most off of sacrificing that pawn on the board? And I feel like I don't see enough conversation about that in the world. Um, because again, you have to think beyond the things that we see on the surface. And even with our understanding a little bit of what goes on beyond the surface, and even with some people in higher positions or whatever that have more visual understanding than things that I can comprehend with the resources that I have. Why is there not more questions about how things are being run in this world and in this government and in certain power structures? We're not questioning the authorities enough. I feel like, again, and I'm not saying that as a like distractions from issues that happen at the lower level, but at the same time, it's like, to get to a solution, you have to get to the root of the problem. And if certain problems keep coming up, you know, and there's constant, when you constantly get to the root of the problem, it's always this source that's kind of like pulling strings in the background, or even someone giving orders to someone else. So someone pulling somebody else's strings that's trying to pull your strings. So even though you feel like you're dealing with your own puppet master, who is your manager, someone's pulling their strings too, you know, and someone's giving them orders to go about doing certain things, and they might have to do things that compromises with their values and the things that they stand for, but that's the order that's being given to them. And if they don't follow those orders, their life is at risk. Not life, but like, livelihood. Like, you might not be making money or whatever the case may be. And then for me, like, and I say this just from like a brief time working in like a corporate space, it's just like, okay, who's the head of the department, you know, and who's that person's boss? And why is it being run like this? And like, who do you go to ask questions? And again, especially like, and I say this from experience being a secretary, I'm dealing with people who walk in and, they have questions and say they want to meet the person that's, you know, the head of the department or whatever the case may be, but they have to go through me, and I'm the one that sets the appointments and whatnot and checks their availability and all these things. And, say they have an issue, or say they make a phone call and they're like, yeah, like, I'm trying to do this, I'm trying to do that, and I'm having these problems, and they're bringing their problems to you, but you're just doing your job. And ultimately, like, say they have a problem with the system, and like what's being shown to them. But it's like, okay, but what software is running the system? You know, that's IT tech, you know? And it's like, okay, who's running the tech department? Who's the head tech IT technician? You know, but you're going to the secretary, they're just operating the computer. They don't know how the in and outs work, you know? And so, say if somebody has like a technical problem and it's like, all right, but like, yeah, you got to bring that to IT. Who's the head of IT? That's the person to talk to, you know. But yeah, so it that certain experiences as it pertains to that has brought me the question of like, you know, and then also seeing other creators bring this up as a topic of like something to consider. It's like, a lot of times I feel like there's a lot of buzzwords that go around that pertains to like holding people accountable and like narcissistic behavior and gaslighting people, and like, it's hard to hold somebody accountable if they're trying to gaslight you and they're like beating around the bush or whatever the case. And my whole thing is like, okay, you know something that's come up um on Bohemian Divas content was like the difference between responsibility and accountability. And I feel like oftentimes we want accountability from people without looking at who all is responsible. It's easy to look at the face of a company and the face of a brand and the face of a movement and the face of, you know, an industry, especially if that, but it's like who all is responsible, especially if the face of the brand is benefiting the least, you know? And it's easy to like point the finger at the first thing that you can see, but who are all the players involved? Who's everybody that's on the board? Why is there certain messaging and certain agendas being pushed intentionally? And who benefits from that? And it's easy to get caught up in like the drama stuff, and I'm not saying like certain things are important to address and important to talk about, but there needs to be more discussion asking the bigger questions. Like, okay, if we know that there's certain agendas being pushed, why is that being pushed? And who's doing the pushing? Why are they pushing this agenda, and who's doing the pushing? And who benefits from the agenda being pushed? Chances are it's not the person at the front desk. They don't benefit from that. And then God forbid you do something where like say you're new at a job, and again you're like a secretary, and you're just operating off a system that's given to you, and you notice that something's wrong with the system, and like, okay, this is the system that's given to me, but something's wrong with the system, and I don't know the people over at IT, but somebody got to fix this. And then sometimes, even in situations where, like, say you might be the smaller person in terms of a hierarchy, but you notice that the boss is doing something wrong, or, authorities or whoever, and say you're like either new or you're somebody of a lesser position, and you call them out. That usually you might be right on holding the people responsible accountable, but just having the audacity to say something's wrong here puts you at risk. Why is that? You know? And if you express yourself in any way, um, say you may express yourself in a way that might not come off as like the best way, right? And especially like if you're someone that you know you're qualified for a higher position, but you feel like limited to the opportunities that are being presented to you, and you know you can do better, and you know that you are better, and and you show up and do the best that you can, but you're in these situations and circumstances that limit you and intentionally try to make you do the job that nobody wants to do. And in that space, it's like, okay, there's so many things happening in the background, things that you know and things that you don't know. And, especially in a situation where you know you're more qualified than what's being presented to you, it could be frustrating and it could be triggering. And, and sometimes it's easy to address situations from a space of like frustration because you don't feel appreciated, and you feel like you have to constantly advocate for yourself and constantly explain yourself and explain why this is happening like this, and why you could be doing better, or why you have better ideas versus the ideas that people try to like give you to work on. And it's like, okay, well, you know without all the clutter and distractions and people pulling you in all these different directions, what's the truth of you, you know and not only that, but do you get an opportunity to let that side shine? And you know and in that discovery of like, okay, well, if all these things are going on in this corporation, and you have all these people pulling these strings and telling, oh, you should work on this, you should do this, you should watch this, you know send this message here, and you show up and you do your job, or you say, you know what, actually I think I have a better idea, or maybe this might not be the route, maybe we should do something like this. And and of course, time and time again, when you do that and people overlook you, and are constantly like making you feel like it's not enough, or like you're not smart enough, or you're not talented enough, or whatever it might be, like you're constantly like a problem rather than a solution. And that's irritating. I've constantly dealt with that in so many spaces where I know I was an asset to a space, where I would be employee of the month and stuff like that. And I know I can bring positivity to a space, but it's frustrating trying to constantly prove that when you show up and do it, you know? And even when you have better ideas than what's given to you from the higher ups, but then say something doesn't go right, all the blame is on you. But then it begs the question, well, okay, well, then who's actually responsible? If I'm doing the orders that's being given to me and it doesn't come out right, but the people on top are still thriving, but I'm getting in trouble based on the job that was given to me to do. But then when I present an idea where I'm like, I'm not really feeling this, maybe we might want to try this like this. This is a better idea, and then people in higher position don't listen to you, even though you have better ideas than what's given to you. And then say something goes wrong, and then now you're the one to blame. But, no one's really looking at who all is responsible then. And, and then oftentimes, like, I know something that I'm working on is like being better at speaking from a space of like first of all, taking time to really like process something versus just reacting. I know people thrive off of that and they live for that. And that's usually the juicy content. And, and if they could get you to do it, especially on reality TV shows, and, when they throwing drinks and all these things and popping off on people and going in and cussing somebody out, because, if you can, you can. And then sometimes people deserve it. Sometimes people deserve it. But, and then when people bring that out of you, bring that out of you intentionally, you know, and then react based on you reacting to something that triggered you or whatever the case may be. that's something that I've struggled with, because there's many instances in my life where I felt like manipulated, misunderstood, blamed, attacked, when all I've tried to do is like be there and support people and like show up as my best version of myself, especially in circumstances and situations where I didn't have to show up at all, you know. But I do, because I mean well and I care and I just want to see people do well. And lo and behold, like there's certain instances that, you realize like, oh, this isn't a safe space for me. This is not, allies, and you don't know why, and it's like, well, what did I do to you? And sometimes it's just the light in you, you know, or whatever reason, they can cook up or write out in script into the life, but whatever. And I've gotten to a point in my life these days where, you know, initially what I would do, because like out of a mindset of being a people pleaser, I would just want the conflict to go away. I will always try to avoid conflict or stop it from happening or end it or whatever. And even if that required me cleaning up messes that didn't belong to me, or, apologizing in situations where I know I was owed an apology as well, but just to be the bigger person and just to get to the resolution and solve the problem and just fix it and, like just get over with it, I'll just apologize or whatever. And, in recent years, I've just gotten fed up with that. I got fed up for constantly apologizing and not receiving apologies for where I felt like people had wronged me. And I know there's this saying of like, you gotta, um, forgive people even if they don't, even if you didn't receive the apology that you deserve or whatever the case may be. And I feel like that's a mature way of thinking. And under normal circumstances, that would be my default, is to like, what's the most mature way to handle this? What's the most logical way to deal with this? But I've just been in my emotions a lot lately. And because like a lot of the things that I deal with is very emotionally triggering. And I feel like anyone with eyes that can see that should understand that. I'm not using that as an excuse. I'm just, just saying that plainly because that's just the facts, And so in those instances, sometimes you say things out of impulse and you say things out of like retaliation. And, you may feel justified in your feelings, but your approach and how you say it is wrong. Or you may say the wrong thing, or, you might not enunciate or clarify yourself well enough. And I know I've made that mistake several times, especially in situations where I feel like I constantly have to defend myself. And I've time and time again have proven myself and like, told my side of things or told the truth or, thoroughly explained what all was happening from my perspective. And, and with that explanation, things make a lot of sense. And it's like, oh, okay, that makes sense why that happened like that or why that situation was like that. And then there's constantly things coming up like, oh, but look at this. Oh, but look at that. And then I'm constantly saying, okay, yeah, that happened, but look at what was happening in the background. Yeah, that happened, but okay, look what prompted that into happening. Okay, yeah, that happened, but look at who benefits from this happening in the first place. Look who instigated these situations. That's constantly happening. That's a constant reoccurrence. And when you feel like you constantly have to explain yourself, it gets to a point where it's like, I feel like there's not an explanation that I could say that's going to make people like feel away because I'm constantly having to do this. And it's like, when is me constantly like, proving myself and showing up and, debunking certain like rumors or like perceptions or whatever the case may be. And then mind you, also fakes while in real time living in a reality where people try to pull you in so many different directions. And even in the midst of being pulled in all these different directions, you still somehow, some way show up as the truest version and, and tell the truth and hold other people accountable and then find ways to hold yourself accountable. And even if people like are pulling you in all these different directions, you still want to show up and do good. You still want to be of service. You still care about the world and care about people. And it's not until these like triggering situations or frustrating circumstances where, like, people bait you into like rage, and and then of course you get out of line or you say something that's out of line or whatever the case may be. And and you're just like left constantly explaining yourself. I say all that to say, like, when you're constantly in those circumstances, it gets to a point where you get tired of like explaining yourself, you get tired of apologizing, you get tired of like, trying to explain that it's not just you, there's other things going on. And of course, like, again, when you're the front desk person, the people walking in the office only looking at you. They're not looking at the people in the back that's telling you, giving you the paperwork and telling you. And then even if they are, somehow, some way, they have to come to you. They have to address you or talk about you, or talk to you because you're the front desk person. So it's like, okay, you see these people back here. You see what's happening back here. Why are you giving me a hard time? You know, and I'm just trying my best out here. Sometimes it feels like that. But, and in those instances, I feel like in recent years, I've gotten away from just jumping into taking accountability for things, even if I know I'm not the one that's responsible, and it's not that I want that I'm like afraid of accountability or avoid it or whatever the case may be. I just felt like there was a point in time in my life where I was constantly taking accountability and constantly being the bigger person and trying to look at things logistically and consider all the people in play, and maybe, okay, I was wrong here, I probably hurt this person, I said the wrong things, oh, this is all my fault. And then like realizing like there's people who like were egging me into doing things and I didn't even, or like pulling strings or whatever. And and in those instances realizing like all the things that go into place, especially in like workspaces, whereas like the only reason why you got caught up in this situation is because your boss is trying to meet a certain quota, and and they need you to do all the brunt work, and you got to deal with these people yelling at you at the front desk. But lo and behold, this is benefiting the boss, in the back office. um you know, Trying to get you to hurry up so they can meet whatever goal they have for whatever. And you doing all the work and you dealing with people complaining. And the whole time you don't even really realize that, there's somebody, you know, just like chilling in the back seat, just taking credit for the work that you're doing, you know? And once being in a lot of situations like that, that's when I was like, you know what? I'm not going to be so quick to like apologize and this and that. And, I'm just going to hold space for my rage and hold space for like just being frustrated and feeling like I constantly have to like explain myself and all these things. And, and in that, I know that I've like said things that have probably like offended folks or whatever. I'm sure there's a list of it all. And, and if there was a script to my life, I'm sure those parts were written on the script too. But right. Well, of course, we forget about the responsibility of the script writers, but all right. But I say that to say, like, look, I, under normal circumstances, am not a person that intends to offend and disrespect and like, and even like condone behavior that's like just messed up in any way. Even if I'm in a situation where like I have to have an uncomfortable conversation with, you know, certain people, or like people in management or whatever. And it's like, look, I get it, you're the manager in this particular instance, but this isn't right. And I know you want me to do this job. Why, I don't know, or how this benefits people, I don't know, or how you all do what you do, I don't know. I'm just showing up, just trying to be me in this world and trying to make a way out of no way find a way to make a way out of no way. And in dealing with that, sometimes I got to take the heat for stuff that y'all doing back here. And I don't think that's fair. And sometimes I get frustrated and I express that frustration and, thinking there's definitely been times where I was like in a space where I thought I was like just getting a chance to vent to myself and not have to deal with like, of course, like expressing your frustrations, but then like, all right, you still got to show up and get back to the job. But, and then maybe like your boss overhears you or something like that. And under normal circumstances, like they wouldn't. Like, is it like if you're at your house and you're like, venting on the phone or to somebody about like your day and all these things. And it's like, okay, like your boss isn't at your house. They shouldn't know what you talk about in the privacy of your own fucking space, but it's still, you have to be mindful of all those things. And knowing that you're justified in your expression, but how you express yourself might make people feel away. And I don't know. I feel like I hope that makes sense. But the main point that I want to get to is, for one, I'm working on being better about not reacting and taking a moment to really process everything and understand what all is at play and who all is at play, who all is pulling the strings before responding. Um, I feel like I've been dealing with a lot of situations that's been like sparking um frustrations, and it's easy to like fall into that, and it's easy to want to cuss somebody out and let them know like, bitch, fuck you and everything that you got going on and this and that and whoop whoop, and it's like it's easy to go down that road, but at the same time there's better ways to handle it, and I'm learning that. And then also getting back to a space of balancing accountability and responsibility, and understanding that there's certain instances where to the outside person looking in, it seems like there's certain things that I might be responsible for, but really I'm just doing something through the task that's given to me, in a workspace. So again, if we're like somebody at the front desk is like, oh, but you're the one that set the appointment, this and that. I'm like, yeah, that's because my boss told me that was when they were available. You know, that's because that's how they, you know, let me know, or left a message or whatever the case may be, that that's when they were available. And if something switched or something changed, and it's like, now you at my desk yelling at me. And I'm like, hold on, I don't even know the full situation, or like, where are you getting your information from? Like, cite your sources. Where are the sources at? Because it's like I can't even go back and get direct context to information that you have, because I might not have access to that. You might have access on a different software platform, and you have an issue with IT, and I'm like, I don't have access to the software that you got. So, and mind you, sometimes with certain people, it's like, because, and I say this because I was working at a school, like say they have an issue with like how certain classes were coming up on their software. Because you're not a student, you don't get the same software. So you don't see what other people are seeing. And so they're coming to you with their problem of signing up for a class. And it's like, I don't see the system how you're seeing it. So I don't know what you're talking about. Or I don't know how to fix this problem how you want me to fix it. But you coming to me like I'm IT. I'm not IT. Like I don't do coding. I tell you, I show you what's on my screen and I say it like that, and I just keep it very forthright and straightforward. And sometimes that might be a little too blunt for people and too real, but I'm like, look, if you got problems with the programming, you got to go to the IT people, because there's a whole department for that. There's people who know how that works, who operate that software, who operate that system, who knows how to do the coding, who come up with the coding, themselves. and and dish that out. I'm not in that department. People be at my desk like, um, fix these IT problems, and I'm like, that's not my department. I'm just doing what the head of my department is, telling me what the agenda is for the day, you know? And yeah, so it's like, all right, sorry that these situations are happening, but I'm like, and I want to help, but it's like, I don't got the software that I don't have access to the software that you're talking about. So I'm just going off of based on what you're telling me about coding. And I'm just like, okay, well, I'm gonna try to understand this to the best of my ability. Some of it just sounds completely foreign to me. Some of it's like, okay, I know that you're saying that this is what happened, but I don't even know what you're talking about. And for the most part, like I have pretty good memory about a lot of the things that happen in my life. And if not, like I go above and beyond to like keep record of things in my life, you know, because I think that's important. Telling your own story and having your own, you know, documentation of your life, and just like in a workspace that as well. Like I'm very, I try to be on point about like taking notes and remembering certain events and this and that. And I might be like a little off here and there, but for the most part, I know like, okay, this happened at this point, but in order for this task to get done, this got to happen. And, but I know on this day that didn't work because, there was a problem this day and this, like I'm pretty detail oriented as it pertains to like stuff like that, and if I like make mistakes or whatever, I'm cool with like I have the self-awareness to know like, all right, yeah, I was out of line. I messed up here. Or I might have sent the wrong email or I said the wrong message or I said the message the wrong way or whatever. Um and and then sometimes it may come off wrong because of like just being in a space of frustration and constantly having to explain myself. Like it's like when somebody's having a problem and you're trying to explain it to them and you keep having to explain it and each time it like you feel like it don't get no easier to understand, especially when there's so much going on and you're just one person to a bigger thing that's happening. It's like you one person in one department and there's multiple departments and you asking me about something of different departments that I don't even have access to. And I'm just out here trying to pay my bills. I'm just trying to eat like everybody else. I'm trying to stack my money, save a little bit, feed my little feline, get my health right, give back to the community every now and then when I can. That's the type of time I'm on. But a lot of the like the little problems, the tech problems and stuff that was coming up, it's like, look, I'm not IT. I can try to learn and understand what you're talking about, but you want me to fix a problem that's not even in the department that I'm instructed in and was taught and trained to work at. And I want to get to the solution. I want to like, help, but sometimes it's frustrating when people keep bringing you these problems and you keep explaining yourself and it's like, oh my gosh, how many times do I have to explain myself? It gets to a point where it's like I don't even care how you feel anymore. Like feel how you want to feel about me, even though I know the truth of me and I know who I am. And it's like, everything like I can explain myself and I can prove myself so many times, but it's like if you want to think like the worst of me because I don't know what you want me to know that I don't have access to know, and I'm just trying the best with what I got access to and what I am trained to do, like okay, well, it gets to a point where it's like you stop caring about how people feel about you, even if it's like wrong, you know and in those instances I know like it's not the best way to handle customer service and all these things, and I've had to you know fix those things, and and that I don't mind, like that I know is an issue with my way of communication, even if, which is tough again because that thing of responsibility, when you're trained to handle situations a certain way, and you're trained to, you know, command the circumstances, and, take certain control of instances. And then when it doesn't go right, then it's like, okay, and you want to be the bigger person and apologize, but now, like, okay, even though this was the training, this isn't the right way to do this, you know? And of course, the person at the front desk don't care. They don't know. They just looking at you like this not working. They don't know, they're not with you while you're being trained. And then when you show it to them and you show them like, look, this is the binders that I have to go through to understand what I'm doing, and the control systems and this and that and how this is organized, like, you know, and you try to explain it to these people so they at least have an understanding of where you're coming from. And then mind you, at the same time, you don't know everything that's going on in the system. So it's like it's tough trying to like learn a system, explain yourself to people who have complaints about systems in different departments, and then you're trying to show them, like, as you're learning, is one thing that's being taught to you and trained to you, and then it's another thing when you like pick up things on your own and you learn different tactics that help you get your job done a little bit more efficiently, and have you and give you a better understanding of like what all needs to be done and how everything works, even beyond what the person training you is trying to make you out to believe, or not make you out to believe, but make you out to like do. And it's like, oh, this is how we do things, this is our system, this and that. And then you discover that there's other ways that, and other things that, there's other ways to do it. And there's other things that goes on behind the scenes that you don't know. And then trying to explain that to a customer, and trying to explain that to someone at the front desk is, you know, irritating. And not only irritating, but frustrating at times when they're hell-bent on just like trying to make you the scapegoat and trying to like, yell at you and blame you and all these things. And it's just so much that's going on in the background. And, in those instances, like, I've learned in customer service that like, you know, that whole notion of like the customer is always right is wrong. Like I don't agree with that. I think it's bogus. And, and I feel like that's not something that should be pushed in retail or any industry, cuz a lot of times the customers are wrong and the people that show up at the desk are wrong. And, you know, and they try to tell you how to do something that you were trained to do, and you're just trying to like handle the situation the best that you can. And I feel like there has to be a way for us to communicate where one can express those things and express, like, look, I understand why you're frustrated, but understand that I don't have all the access and the resources and the understanding of what's actually going on and why you're frustrated about these things. I'm going to try to fix the problem the best that I can, and I want us to get to a solution. I want us to get to a situation where you're happy, I'm happy, you can go about your life, I go about my life, you know and truthfully, move forward, and just like, do the things that you got to do. And you know finding the balance of like wanting to stand on business and stand on what you know to be true, and what isn't true based on what and your expertise and your training and all these things. But then also at the same time, it's like, look, I understand that you feel this way. I understand that you feel slighted, and I understand that you feel disrespected, or like, you're not getting the responses and the answers that you need. And for that, I apologize. And, it's not my intention to frustrate you, or, rub you the wrong way, or whatever. You know, I'm just trying to do the best that I can with the things that are given to me and the resources that I have allotted to me. and based on the knowledge that I've learned based on, the teachings that happen here. Even though I have my own ideas that I feel like could be running certain things a little bit better. But, you know, and being in those situations is frustrating. But I try to do the best I can. I hope this makes sense. It does make sense. It does make sense. I don't hope it makes sense. I know I'm making sense. I'm using like real life experiences to like convey the message that I'm trying to say, around that whole conversation. And, and I hope that it challenges people to be a little bit more open minded, um, and, and consider like all the factors of something that's going on in real time rather than just what you see on the surface or even what you see behind the scenes. Like, like I think, especially when it comes to like things like reality TV, even if you're watching and you're following people's lives, you're seeing what the editors are showing you. Are like, I don't know if I mean, it's one now we got like live stream, and I don't know if that's something that a lot of people are into, like where people are like streaming all day or something. I don't know. Um, but I do understand that like edited TV, of course, is going to be edited for you to see the juicy things and the drama and, oh, this person was going off on this person. Oh, this person was saying this, you know, and it's geared to amplify controversy and drama because that's what people thrive off of. That's entertaining rather than, boring things like the truth. Sometimes just like regular everyday things, like you just trying to live your life and, whatever, and just keep it real, that might not seem as entertaining to people. So, you got to stir up the pot sometimes. And again, like, and also like another thing with like reality TV, it's like sometimes they'll like spin the block on certain issues and dramas. Like, all right, if they couldn't get the reaction out of the drama the first time it was brought up, then it's like, okay, they'll bring up that same storyline and, and then try to get people to, feel away. And for me, like, I always see through that. Always, every time. Cause I'm like, new quarter, new drama. All right, you ain't last one we debunked. Now you bringing this up. Now you baiting this situation. Now you try and not only baiting, rage baiting, but then also trying to influence what the response of that rage bait would be. Because that's a whole thing too. It's like, look, if we can't naturally, like, all right, in certain instances when it comes to reality TV, they'll create a scenario and then just let people react. But if the reaction isn't as like big and controversial and whatever and like upsetting, then at this point I feel like they gonna give you a script like, look, this is the problem, and then we gonna write out what you gonna say about this problem. Like, oh girl, this person is gonna spit on you, or this person is gonna throw a drink at you, and then you're gonna pop off and call this person this, and then y'all gonna get into a fight, and and that's this episode. And then people's gonna be mad at this person because it's like, oh, why would they do that? Why would they say this? And then some people get it. Some people are like, well, yeah, because that person was doing this and that, and it's all for the entertainment of it all. But nobody actually cares about like the real issues at hand. Like, who's writing these scripts? Who's writing these scripts? Who's approving these storylines? Who even hired these people to be on the show? Where's the office at? Who's running the office? You know, like who's coming up with these ideas for, reality TV, especially as it pertains to like black folks, being combative with each other. And I'm not gonna lie and act like I don't be entertained by it a little bit. I do. I do. However, there's a bigger, you know, chess move at play. And there's people who benefit from the drama. And it's like, who's running the IT department? And who's benefiting from that? I want to know. I want to know who's running IT and who's writing the code for the programming and trying to clear the bugs and all of those things. I want to know. That's what I want to know. Yeah. But anyway, so to conclude this, I'll just say, I talked about, like, the main topic of, like, who's responsible, but in situations and instances where, like, even if there's other people responsible and somehow, some way, like, I play a part in it, you know, I under normal circumstances have the self-awareness to have accountability for my own actions and the things that I say, you know, but my whole situation, like in like certain workspaces, is just that it's hard for me to do that when I know there's so many hands on the pot. And there's so many different factors that are influencing the environment and the circumstances that are putting me in situations where I have to respond a certain way, or I'm taught to react a certain way, or taught or made to, have to handle a situation where it's like customer service, where you get these scripts and you got to read the script. And, if the customer starts wilding out a little bit, you got the script to try to de-escalate the situation. And it's like, you just following the script. So it's like, how mad can you be with the person that's following the script versus the person that wrote the script for them to follow in the first place? Or just the company itself. Like, why is the company structured that way? Why, like, and you could argue that with health insurance. It's like, people calling up trying to get their policies and stuff, trying to like heal themselves. And, and they're paying for these premiums. They're paying for this. You're putting all this money into these situations, and then when you need help and when you need financial support because you're trying to get your health intact, you're trying to get your life together, you're trying to balance your finances and balance your financial stability and balance your health at the same time. Say you got kids and all these things, and you calling up these people and you're like, look, I've been paying this premium. I need this. I need help, and they like, yeah, no, we can't really help. And this person just reading the script. This person just reading the script that's given to them. But the real issue is, like, why are health insurance companies structured like that? Why are they like that? Why is it structured in a way where the people who are paying all this money for insurance to help them and prior to being in need of help, like, it's kind of like a safety net where, like, say, God forbid something happens, but you got this thing that you've been investing in that's supposed to take care of you when things go awry. And then when you need it, they're like, "Oh yeah, you can't get approved for this much. You still got to pay all this for the copay. The copay is on you and this and that." But it's like, bro, I've been paying for this premium. What you mean? Been putting all this sweat, blood, and tears into these premiums, and you telling me I can't even benefit off of my premium, off of that I'm spending my money on? Why are these health insurance companies run like this? Who's coming up with the structure like this? Because it's crazy and it's outrageous, and not enough people are talking about that. And I get it when you on the phone with customer service or you at the desk and you got the issue with the receptionist for whatever reason. But it's like, look, you're just upset at that person because that's the first person you see. And you're seeing these things happen. You're seeing the company, they're the physical manifestation of what this company represents and what they want. And so when they're the, secretary, they're the face of the company. And so you have to speak the messaging and the scripts and the coding and all these things of the company. And you don't realize that, like, this is like all affecting your physical being and, how you operate and see the world and how you go about handling situations and how they train you and all these things. But it's not enough people who have like a clear, direct understanding of the responsibility of the corporations itself. I feel like these corporations aren't being challenged enough. We keep talking about, we keep looking at the battle of the pawns and the opening of the chess game. But it's like, all right, but what's the strategy that each player is going into the game with? And what's the end game? That's all I'm saying. But forgive me for ruffling feathers. It's never my intention. Under normal circumstances, it's never my intention. You know, I really just try to be the best that I can be and show up in these spaces and do a good job and hopefully be you know, of service in this world in a positive way, you know? And I know working in these corporate spaces is exhausting. And especially when the people that's making all the big decisions just get to chill in their office and reap all the benefits while you giving your blood, sweat, and tears to this company that don't pay you enough, struggling trying to pay bills and this and that, and the people at the top just benefiting. We need to talk more about that. But of course, yes, let's also talk about accountability. Let's also, acknowledge when we don't show up in our roles the right way. But I feel like for me, I just like rather be in a situation where like I'm completely like responsible for everything that's going on around me. Like I feel like that's the easiest way. That's the easiest time for me to like apologize and hold accountability. It's like if I ain't got to worry about working for somebody or somebody telling me what to do or telling me, oh, but this is how we do it in this business. I know that that's how you want to do things, but this is how we do things. And when you work here, you have to do it how we do it. And so, customers mad at you, but it's like you just following the orders of this bullshit ass company. So, you know, when I'm in a space where I'm like completely, you know, the head of everything that's going on in the operations around me, and I ain't got to answer nobody, I ain't got to worry about nobody pulling my strings and telling me what to say and telling me what to do, then yeah, I have no problem, you know, owning up and taking accountability and apologizing and de-escalating situations and all these things, but like that's the one thing about working jobs, and that's frustrating, is like when you got to be a part of these organizations and take the brunt of the bullshittery that they got going on. And it's like, y'all mad at me. You need to be mad at IT in that department and then the people that's running this department. That's all I'm saying. But but at the same time, but like, if I give you the wrong paper clip or something like that, and and I say or I mispronounce your name wrong while I'm trying to write you up for your appointment and all these things, and I apologize, and that's my fault, and I will do what I need to do to show up and be a better, citizen in society, and to best assist and show up for you and humanity in this way. I can say that, I can own that, I can hold the accountability for that. And if my communication isn't as great as it could be, and I will do the work to make that better, and as it pertains to how the things that I say can rub people the wrong way, or or offend someone, even though that's not my intention. And again, just going off of like how certain environments try to push you to say these things, it's tough. But that's another instance where it's like, all right, I'll just be the bigger person here, and you know say what needs to be said and just apologize, because it's just the right thing to do. And I get it. But I only challenge people to, really look at the big picture and, really decipher who all is responsible for these circumstances and issues, and keep that same energy for them too. Hold that same smoke for them as well. That's all I'm saying. Much love to y'all. That's the live stream. Did you enjoy this conversation? How do you feel about um, as it pertains to like, just working in these spaces where you're just trying to show up and do what people are trying to tell you to do. And now you got to deal with all the smoke and all these things. And then, you might wow out a little bit and, say some shit that's crazy. And it's like, oh, but you said this and this and that. And it's like, yeah, you're right. All right. I fucked up here, but it's like, I'm just tired. Sometimes I'm just tired. 'Cause I'm not like, I've been working all day. I'm out here just trying to grind and figure out how I'm going to feed myself and feed my baby Angie and like just try to be a better version of myself. And sometimes I be tired. I be tired of y'all. I be tired of these situations and circumstances. You know, grateful for all the things that work out, grateful for all the blessings, and grateful all the good for all the good because I know there's a lot of it. But a lot of times it's like frustrating just trying to like prove your humanity and prove why you deserve to exist. That's all. That's it. Much love to y'all. Have a blessed day.